From New York, what could be an intelligence breakthrough in the Persian Gulf. In late January, the arrest of an al-Qaeda operative with access to such much information, phone numbers, photos, and documents that it might enable U.S. intelligence officials to link al-Qaeda's leaders in northwest Pakistan to the terror group's increasingly active outpost in Yemen. Evan Coleman, who provides counterterrorism analysis for the U.S. government agencies and for this news hour, saying, quote, these kinds of grabs are not all that common. Word of this Obama administration terror success story breaking on the Newsweek website over the weekend, the same weekend in which an atypically defensive and rattled former Vice President Dick Cheney again attacked President Obama as being supposedly soft on terror. Mr. Cheney essentially accused much of the Bush administration of being soft on terror, too. More on that in a moment. In an interview with ABC News, the former Vice President renewing his assault on the current administration's mindset towards fighting al-Qaeda.
It's the mindset that concerns me, John. I think it's very important to go back and keep in mind the distinction between handling these events as criminal acts, which is the way we did before 9/11, and then looking at 9/11 and saying this is not a criminal act, not when you destroy 16 acres of Manhattan, kill 3,000 Americans, blow a big hole in the Pentagon. That's an act of war. What the administration was slow to do was to come to that recognition that we are at war, not dealing with criminal acts. And as I say, my response there dealt specifically with the fact the president called it an isolated extremist. It was not.
Most recently contending, Mr. Cheney, in how it dealt with the arrest of the Christmas bomber, Abdul Muttalib.
The proper way to deal with it would have been to treat him as an enemy combatant. I think that was the right way to go. The thing I learned from watching that process unfold, though, was that the administration really wasn't equipped to deal with the aftermath of an attempted attack against the United States, in the sense that they didn't know what to do with the guy.
So was it a mistake, Mr. Vice President, when your administration took the shoe bomber Richard Reed and within 5 minutes of getting him off that plane, read him his Miranda rights, not only then, but 4 times in the first 48 hours he was held?
Well, first of all, I believe he was not tried. He pled guilty. They never did end up having a trial. Secondly, when this came up, as I recall, it was December of '01, just a couple of months after 9/11. We were not yet operational with the military commissions. We hadn't had all the Supreme Court decisions handed down about what we could and couldn't do with the commissions.
But you still had an option to put him into military custody.
Well, we could have put him into military custody. I don't question that. Point is, in this particular case, all of that was never worked out, primarily because he pled guilty.
In fact, Richard Reed, arrested at the end of December 2001, pleaded guilty in 2003. More than a year later, the administration having had more than enough time to pursue whatever route it wished to have chosen, as it did with everything else. The current White House hitting back against Cheney's lies and hitting back hard, deploying the current Vice President, Joe Biden, to do concurrent interviews from Vancouver, where he is leading the U.S. delegation at the Olympics.
Let me choose my words carefully here. Dick Cheney's a fine fellow. He's entitled to his own opinions. He's not entitled to rewrite history. He's not entitled to his own facts. The Christmas Day bomber was treated the exact way that he suggested that the shoe bomber was treated. Absolutely the same way. I don't know where he has been. Where was he the last 4 years, the last administration?
Where indeed, were it not for his secret undisclosed location, it now appears that sitting Vice President Cheney could have spent much of his time publicly haranguing fellow Bush administration officials. When confronted yesterday with a Bush-era Justice Department document which praised civilian courts as an effective weapon against terror, a document proving that many Bush officials endorsed the current Obama approach, Mr. Cheney acknowledging that there was a difference of opinion within the Bush administration.
They're not doing it all that differently from how you were doing it.
Well, we didn't all agree with that. We had, I can remember a meeting in the Roosevelt Room in the West Wing of the White House where we had a major shootout over how this was going to be handled between the Justice Department that advocated that approach and many of the rest of us who wanted to treat it as an intelligence matter, as an act of war with military commissions. We never thoroughly or totally resolved those issues. These are tough questions, no doubt about it.
Well, Mr. Cheney knows his major shootouts, no doubt about it, as does his friend Harry Whittington. The former vice president on the wrong end of the metaphorical bird shot yesterday when in response to a question about whether the Christmas bomber should be waterboarded, he basically admitted to being a war criminal.
I won some, I lost some.
Ending waterboarding, clearly.
I was a big supporter of waterboarding. I was a big supporter of the enhanced interrogation techniques.
And you opposed the administration's actions of doing away with waterboarding?
Yes.
And then there is the war of choice for profit that Mr. Cheney and the neocons lied their way into. The former vice president and Halliburton CEO's latest lie that the conflict began with the surge and that the 4,376 American lives we have spent to help line the pockets of Cheney and his cronies has been worth the cost.
If they had had their way, if we'd followed the policies they pursued from the outset or advocated from the outset, Saddam Hussein would still be in power in Baghdad today. So if they're going to take credit for it, fair enough for what they've done while they're there, but it ought to go with a healthy dose of thank you, George Bush, up front, and a recognition that some of their early recommendations with respect to prosecuting that war were just dead wrong.
Good to be here, Keith.
This has been treated over the last 24 hours largely as Cheney again attacks Obama. Wasn't the real headline in there that waterboarding admission? I was a big supporter of waterboarding.
It was really quite striking, and it's been underplayed, I think, because of the way he treated it so routinely and just made it seem like something that's perfectly reasonable position to take, perfectly reasonable admission to make at this point in this story. I think one of the overall impression of the interview so far, if you listen to George Will and the comment across the political spectrum from the most reasonable of those commentators, is that Cheney demonstrated that everything he's criticizing President Obama for is an extension of policy that already existed in the Cheney White House, and that these were lost battles within the Cheney White House. That he lost the battles there, and he wants to continue to fight them against the Obama.
This idea that he expanded this backwards a little bit to reveal the unfortunately phrased shootout in the White House between himself and unnamed others. Am I wrong about the tone that whatever else he lacks, and I would say he lacks a grasp of reality, Mr. Cheney has never lacked certitude. Did this seem a little more defensive to you than the previous explosions on the subject?
Well, I think when he's in adult company outside of Fox News, he actually has to adopt a different style, and I think he knows that. And I think he knows when that panel is going to follow him, as they did on ABC News, and analyze everything he has to say, he has to stay a little bit closer to the base, a little bit closer to reality. And so I think that's what you were seeing, a little bit of a defensive crouch about what is George Will going to say. And George Will, by the way, had nothing approving to say about the vice president in the discussion afterwards. And so I think because of that setting, it changes the nature of his rhetoric.
How much of that rhetoric was intended to mitigate the recent successes of the Obama administration in what the Cheney-Bush White House called the war on terror, particularly, I presume, with his ear to the ground and so many thousands of sources feeding him information? And we've seen some evidence that continued after he left the White House, that he probably had some idea about this courier on his way to Yemen with the al-Qaeda Rolodex that they rolled up last month.
And even without that, all you have to do is keep an eye on your newspaper for the heavy kill count that's going on from the drone program that President Obama has targeted toward al-Qaeda. And so, yeah, it was aimed at so many things, Keith. Remember, he is fundamentally a bookseller at this point. He's got to keep the market ready for his book, which he declared on the show will be ready a year from now, and he'll want to come back on that same show to sell the book. He does have history he's contending with. He knows what's on the record. He knows what's going to be revealed long term as more and more documents become unclassified over time. And he knows that he's going to have to be the voice on the record of these news transcripts defending what you find out about him on the record of his own work.
I just have this sense that he's cutting himself a smaller and smaller piece of that corner that he painted himself into quite a while ago.
Yes, he is, and he's looking in that corner for the encouragement of the neocons who never counted George W. Bush among them. They considered George W. Bush their tool. Cheney was their leader, in effect, and he is trying to maintain the support of that corner of Republicanism. And he is doing at least that with these
the Washington Post polling that was released last week that shows that essentially the strongest core issue for Barack Obama is his handling of terrorism, counterterrorism work. 56%, way over economy, way over health care. What has become of the overall meme that Dick Cheney is kind of he's actually, his face is in the trademark that goes next to the statement, Republicans handle terrorism better than Democrats do, and instead of TM it says Dick Cheney's face in it?
Well, you know, I think that the theme actually starts back with tough on communism. It starts back with Joe McCarthy, Republican Senator Joe McCarthy, who tried to demonize Democrats and others as being soft on communism. And exactly the same theme and exactly the same sounds are used to try to demonize Democrats and demonize Barack Obama as being soft on terrorism. The public isn't buying it. The man delivering this message, Dick Cheney, is one of the least popular politicians alive in America today. And so he just isn't getting the headway where he wants it, which is with that independent voter, that swing voter.